Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Wydra, president of the Constitutional Accountability Center, and I'm so delighted to welcome you to the first Purple Chair Chat of 2021. So we at CAC call these our Purple Chair Chats because in normal times, we would be coming to you from our DC offices in our iconic purple wing chairs, but we, like so many of you who are able, are working from home during the COVID pandemic. And I will take this opportunity to wish you all continued safety and health and know that we're with you during these difficult times. And hopefully the programming that we bring to you with Purple Chair Chat helps you connect with current events and also can sometimes be a happy distraction from some of the other struggles that are going on in our lives. So, we have some great things to discuss on today's Purple Chair Chat. Obviously, one of the big events thus far in 2021 was the inauguration of the historic Biden-Harris administration. So we have a new administration with new policies. And for those of us who care about progressive policies, a friendlier administration, and thus far, many friendlier policies. Now, one of the things that always comes up with a new administration, but particularly so with the Biden administration after 4 years of President Trump and so much damage that he did through his own executive actions, is the question of executive orders and executive authority. This is a very timely topic because there was actually a New York Times editorial talking about this today. And so I am delighted to be joined today by Madihha Ahussain, who is special counsel and Muslim advocates for anti-Muslim bigotry. And we are so thrilled that you could join us today, Madihha. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I wanted to start off just by asking you to talk a little bit about Muslim advocates and what it is that you do there as part of Muslim Advocates' important work.
Yeah, absolutely. So Muslim Advocates is a national civil rights organization working in the courts, in the halls of power, and in communities to halt bigotry in its tracks. So the purpose of our work is to ensure that American Muslims have a seat at the table with expert representation so that all Americans may live free from hate and discrimination. And that sort of leads directly into the work that I do, which is focusing on our bigotry and, focusing on our work to stop bigotry. And the goal of our work is to really talk about these issues in a way that's representative of civil rights for American Muslims, but also, again, for all Americans. And the idea that if one community is under attack because of their faith, then it could very well be the next community or the next religious group under attack tomorrow, or the communities that have come before us that have faced attack. And so the goal of our work is to really work in collaboration and coalition with multiple faith groups and a wide range of racial and social justice organizations to be able to pursue our mission and our hopes to achieve safety for all Americans.
Absolutely. I think that's such an important point. American Muslims are such an integral part of the fabric of the American community. And if there's a tear in that fabric, it obviously is harmful to the entire American community. So thank you and your colleagues for your work. So, I think there are a couple things that a lot of folks are thinking of when they think about how the Biden administration can, out of the gate, achieve progress with executive actions. And I think the one that immediately comes to mind for so many of us is reversing the harmful and unlawful Muslim ban that was put into place by President Trump. And before we jump into that, I think this is a good example to talk about for the non-lawyers or non-government wonks out there, kind of the difference between executive action and legislative action. So, in a super, super, super oversimplified way of talking about the three branches of government, Congress is the body that makes the laws, the executive implements and enforces the laws, and the judiciary interprets and applies the laws. Obviously, that's super oversimplified. But within that, there's a lot of authority for the executive to act. And immigration, I think, is one of those areas in which the executive has perhaps some of the most delegated authority. And so can you talk about your work to get the Biden-Harris administration to use its executive authority to, as it did on day one, rescind the Muslim ban?
Yeah, so thank you for, spending time to talk about this. This is something that was very, I think, important for the Muslim community, but really for everyone because of the significance that the Muslim ban and the actions taken by Donald Trump within his first week in office back in what feels like ages ago now, but 4 years ago. The significance of it, like you said, there is authority given to the president, the executive branch, to act in certain areas. Immigration being one of those areas where there's executive authority. There's also other authority as well. There can be legislative action taken. There's the judiciary as well. But what was really interesting about how this all played out is that the executive action taken by Donald Trump was essentially, there's the Immigration and Nationality Act, where there's a particular subsection known as 212F. And I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I'm just mentioning it because we're going to talk about legislative solutions as well. And that's where that comes into play. But that particular piece of the Immigration and Nationality Act does give the president authority to take certain actions in restricting entry into this country for a variety of reasons. Now, using that authority, President Trump enacted the Muslim ban, which actually went through 3 different iterations in order to withstand court proceedings. So it was the 3rd version of the Muslim ban that was upheld by the Supreme Court. And prior to that, multiple courts had struck down other versions of the Muslim ban. Since that time, when the 3rd Muslim ban was upheld by the Supreme Court, President Trump then came in the following year and actually expanded it to include additional countries as well. So obviously, when there was hope for a new administration, we felt as though being strong advocates for how this policy was, like you said, unconstitutional. It was rooted in bigotry. It was not about protecting the safety of our country. It was not about national security. It was about stopping people because of their faith. And it was really fulfilling his promise of having a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering this country, which is what he was using in his campaign as a talking point. And so, we felt it was very important to ensure, and we've had court cases, we've been working on legislative strategy, and really the ultimate act that could take place in order to ensure that the Muslim ban was not going to affect people, the countless individuals and families, was to have the next administration repeal it and rescind it. And so that's what was a focus for us for a long time as we were working towards other solutions under the Trump administration. And I think, it was really just about using the same messaging that we've been using, which is that this is un-American. That countless families have been separated because of the ban. Grandparents have been unable to see their grandchildren. Spouses have been separated and unable to reunite. People have been, waiting for dire medical treatment or critical medical treatment, and they couldn't receive it. People have lost out on job opportunities and educational opportunities because of this. I mean, the list goes on for how people were being affected and continue to be affected today, even though it's been rescinded. There's, it's not going to be undone overnight. And so I think the fact that President Biden was able to keep his commitment and rescind this on the first day sends a really strong message about what his administration stands for, what we as a country stand for, and something that I think we all have known, which it's just pleasant to see again, is that we are about upholding our values and welcoming people of all backgrounds. And I think that's a really big, important first step. And we're really glad that he was able to do that on the first day.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I really think it's important the way that you frame that in terms of the very real harm that was caused to an enormous number of people. And, this was obviously terrible in terms of the rhetoric and, the way that rhetoric can translate into, actions in terms of violence and discrimination. But also, as you said, the immigration consequences of this and how they trickle into every other aspect of life is really important. And, so obviously that first executive action step was really important. But one of the things that the Biden administration seems to be doing, which I think is absolutely the right thing to do from a constitutional perspective, is a both and strategy. So they repealed the Muslim ban, as you talked about, but we also hope that they will be supporting legislation in Congress. Can you talk a little bit about the No Ban Act and how that can fill in some gaps that simple executive action can't?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So you're absolutely right. There's the strategy that they're using is obviously undoing the action that they can, which is through their executive authority, but also pushing Congress and hoping that Congress will take action on a variety of issues. And so the Biden administration introduced the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021. And within that is, there's a range of issues covered relating to immigration, as well as the No Ban Act, as you mentioned. The No Ban Act is a piece of legislation that was introduced in the House of Representatives and actually passed the House last year. And it was also introduced in the Senate. Both Senator Coons and Chris Coons from Delaware and Congresswoman Judy Chu were co-leads on that bill when it was introduced. And the purpose of that bill goes back to what I was talking about before, which is the Immigration and Nationality Act and the subsection 212F, which gives the president authority to do these types of actions or to take these types of actions. That bill would actually add the word religion to 212F. And the reason why that's important is because prior to any sort of legislation like this, there was no restriction on the executive authority for purposes of religion. And so that's why it's really important that that category be added. But in addition to that, there's a number of other things that would be included in the No Ban Act that would make it difficult for any future president to kind of find these loopholes that would allow them to create such a discriminatory ban like the Muslim ban. And that's why rescinding it is important, because it's about what we have right now in front of us. But we also want to ensure that this can never happen again. And in order to ensure that, we need legislative action, because otherwise executive authority would allow them to, take these types of actions in the future. And we don't know what administration would be in the future and what they might want to do and for what reasons. And this is important actually for all communities, because again, under this or under the previous administration, our community was a target. But in future administrations, that authority, without restrictions and without reporting requirements and so on and so forth, we don't know what future actions can be taken. And so that's why the No Ban Act is really important. And we're really glad to see that it was included in that bill that was sent to Congress by the Biden administration for consideration. There's a lot of work to be done still on that. There's a lot of conversations that need to be had. It passed the House of Representatives. The next step would have been the Senate. But under this new era and with the new Congress, we technically still have to go through those processes again. And so we are really hopeful that with the support of the Biden administration and under this new Congress, that we can actually make significant progress with the bill. But I also just want to quickly mention that the bill itself is really historic. It's the first time that any House of Congress has passed a bill that specifically focuses on the civil rights of Muslims. And that in and of itself is historic, and the fact that it passed is historic. And so, we're going to continue working on this. There's a lot of advocacy that we can do around the language of the bill and making sure that it passes. And so we are really glad to have a strong coalition in support of the bill. There were corporations that expressed support. There's a coalition that we work with, that the No Ban Act coalition, that has been really active on this. And by the time the bill itself reached the floor of the House, there were over 400 organizations that had expressed support. So we're very hopeful, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say, including Constitutional Accountability Center, we definitely support the No Ban Act as well. For a lot of reasons, but I think, some of the points that you bring up really show that this is rooted in the best of what we think of as American values, the idea of ensuring the protection of free faith expression and ensuring that faith communities can flourish free from discrimination, and ensuring civil rights for all. And, with respect to the immigration restrictions, also welcoming immigrants and recognizing that immigrants are a vital and cherished part of the American family. So, I think the values argument for this act are incredibly important. So with the time we have left, I want to talk about, so we talked about executive orders as part of the way that the Biden administration can achieve progress. But there are also other actions that the administration can take that come in other forms. And, one of the things that I think is interesting is changes to internal policies. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that, I know Muslim Advocates is concerned about, as well as so many across the nation, is the urgent problem of police reform and racist policing. And we've had this year of reckoning with a very age-old problem in this country of racist state-sponsored violence. And, we've been concerned with a lot of the shootings of Black Americans, and obviously Black Muslim Americans have fallen victim to racist policing as well. Can you talk a bit about how the Biden administration, through just changing their own executive policies, can work on some of those police reform issues, while again, we also work on the other hand with Congress and trying to do things like end qualified immunity, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think really the crux of the issue, and one of the things that we're really, really concerned about, is the way, as you've eloquently stated, is this idea that particular communities are being targeted. And there are a number of resources given to law enforcement agencies to be able to actually misuse and target our communities in a way that leads to violence. And we've seen that time and time again. Too many lives have been lost. And I think one of the most important things that an administration can do is first to kind of reset the tone, right? And so, like you've said, like changing internal policies, I think, is really important. And it doesn't have to be done through a formal executive action like we were talking about with executive orders. And so, to name a few things that we think would be really important, first, we believe that, there's been a lot of funding that has gone to grant programs or essentially law enforcement agencies, again, like I said, in their communities to carry out biased policing practices that ultimately and have historically always been used to target vulnerable communities. So some of these programs have been geared towards violent extremism, but what they do is they ultimately have this sort of tone and lens of focus on, for example, Muslim communities, often also affecting Black and Brown communities in the same way. And so we would love to see the administration terminate programs like that with that intent of eliminating biased policing practices on the ground. In addition to that, we think that there needs to be an increase in funding for the Department of Justice and the Civil Rights Division in particular to ensure that proper resources are given to investigate the police department and the officers that have been responsible for these types of acts. Because really, we need to get to the root issue. We need to be able to understand why this is happening in different police departments across the country. And if the Department of Justice and the Civil Rights Division are not well resourced, not well staffed enough, or don't have that listed or recommended as a priority from the administration, it'll just get brushed under the rug. And unfortunately, we've seen that happen also time and time again. And so I think those are some areas where the administration can really set the tone on this. In addition to that, we think a national public database that could be created by the White House or used as a tool can be sort of developed to track police misconduct, and all police departments could provide data to that database. So that way there's a way of, again, having sort of a bigger picture around how this is affecting communities across the country. I could go through a whole list of things, but I think that, those are some examples of what the administration can do to really set the tone on this.
Yeah, I think, as you mentioned, the priorities, the funding, the tone, is really important, especially when we see in contrast to police targeting Black and brown communities. We had a siege of the U.S. Capitol, an insurrection that was rooted in white supremacy, and most of the perpetrators appear to be white. And, the idea that there might be an increase in domestic terror laws when, I think that your advocacy is that the laws we have are sufficient. And if we add new laws, they will likely be used to target Black and brown communities instead of the white nationalist domestic extremists who really perpetrate most domestic terrorism acts. And so, I think striking the tone and the priorities there is very important. So I could talk to you for like 5 hours on this. In like the 1 minute we have left, I want to make sure that we talk about the importance of judges and representation of American Muslims on the bench, because I think many people will be shocked to know that we do not have any American Muslim federal judges.
Yes, so thank you for bringing that up. Again, this is all part of our work to really diversify and have representation. Since the time that we started talking about this, I believe there are actually a couple of magistrate judges now, but there is no Senate confirmed federal judge that is a Muslim. And there was a historic nomination for the first Muslim federal Senate confirmed judge. There was a nomination under the Obama administration, but that never, as we know, there were a lot of there was work.
It was Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, there were efforts to block those nominations, obviously, and so that never came to fruition. But we do think representation like that would be really important, especially as we continue to look to the courts to uphold our justice system in a very unique time. The courts served a really important purpose under the Trump administration, and we know that Mitch McConnell and the Senate was able to push through a historic number of nominations under that administration. And so now we need to ensure that we're diversifying and having that representation in the courts in the way that is really truly representative of our country. And so we would love to see that happen, and we would love to see the Senate confirm a Muslim federal judge in the near future. And we're going to continue to advocate for that.
Absolutely. We'll be right there with you. Thank you so much, Madihha, for joining us. And thank you to everyone for tuning in for this Purple Chair Chat. You can always find out more about CAC and look at previous Purple Chair Chats at our website, theusconstitution.org. Thank you so much, and please be well.
Thank you.